Well, hello, my radio friends. Now, in this video installment, old Uncle Dave is going to talk about something he doesn't talk about very much, and that is horn speakers. Because, truth be known, once I fell in love with the cone speakers, I sold off much of my horns, but I chose to hold on to these Manavox horns, and that's the crux of this video. Earlier, I posted a video, if I may, about an Atwater Kent and a particular first involved with that set. Well, that's what I want to touch on in this video, is these Manavox horns and a first in speaker technology. And with that said, let's dig a little bit deeper. Now, these Manavox horns, one will notice immediately on, these are both R3 horns. This is a B and this is a D model. Notice there are quite a few differences within. The one to the right is a smooth glossy black finish. The one to the left is, of course, the crinkle finish that many of us are familiar with. Now, I have to say, Manavox taunted this crinkle finish as a tonal enhancement, that it was an improved tonal quality. Truth be known, I'm sure it was a cost-saving measure. It was easier and probably cheaper to manufacture and finish and crinkle than what it was to spray in a high-gloss smooth finish. Even though it was, I'm sure it was a cost-saving measure, but if you ask Manavox, it was for tonal improvement, and of course, I believe that. Anyway, with that said, let's dig a little deeper on the horns themselves. One will notice the one to the right has a straight neck, and the one to the left has a curved neck. It was very common in the early 1920s, and I believe about 1921 when Manavox came out with their horns. Most manufacturers had a straight neck horn. And the main reason they went to a curved neck horn, from my understanding, it was for horn stability. Now, it's not a concern with this Manavox because the bass is such a heavy device. But on your smaller horns, where the bass might have been very light and a light driver, the straight neck horn and then a bell protruding out the front made the horn very frontal heavy and very prone to face plant, so to speak. So by going to a curved neck, it brought the weight of the bell itself, the horn, out to the rear, and then brought it out to the front and stabilized, centerlined the weight distribution of the horn itself. Now, let's touch on the Manavox driver itself, and I mentioned a moment ago about there being a first with this Manavox driver, and that's what I want to touch on most importantly in this video. Manavox, inside this device here, this portion here, was, my understanding, the first manufacturer to employ a voice coil speaker. Now, in the lower part of this is a field coil, a many wire field coil. The top here is employed a voice coil, just like all of us are familiar with in the 30 sets, a small cylindrical voice coil. And instead of the voice coil affixing to a paper cone like we are all familiar with, Manavox affixed that voice coil to a metal diaphragm. So instead of the voice coil moving up and down, moving a paper cone, it vibrated a diaphragm and, of course, reproduced the tone, reproduced the audio. Also, along with that, we have under this cover an output transformer. So there you have it, essentially what the 30s sets most all of us are familiar with: an output transformer, a field coil, and a voice coil. And all this was employed in 1921. What a marvel, an absolute marvel. With that said, let's take it one step further. There are 4 terminals on these speakers. In fact, let's look at this B model here. There's 2 on the front and there's 2 on the rear. These 2 front ones are your input from your set, which of course goes to your output transformer, which matches the high impedance of your set to the low impedance of your voice coil, because the voice coil here is about an 8 ohm voice coil. So just like the 1930s, here's your output transformer, and once again, here's your input. Lastly, on the rear, there's 2 terminals. That's a 6-volt source to energize your field coil. Now, we'll say this: these are pretty thirsty devices. With this field coil, ohms about 6 ohms. You're putting 6 volts in, so do your math. That's a 1 amp draw. So this field coil is going to require a 6-volt source, more than likely separate of the set itself. But these are magnificent horns. They truly, truly are. They're very sensitive. The only negative is the metallic diaphragm does add some metallic sound to the audio. But boy, what a neat technological marvel. 1921, a field coil, a voice coil, and an output transformer. Who would have thought? That's why I love this hobby. There's a neat amount of firsts, and this is certainly a first for the speaker realm. Thank you so much. Hope you found it informative, and we will meet again.